What is going on, YouTube? Just helping you out here. And in this video, I'm going to be unboxing the Nike Downshifter 10 running shoe. Once I have used the product for a decent bit of time, I'd be more than happy to make a review video where I discuss what I like, what I dislike, and essentially giving my overall opinion on a variety of factors regarding the product. Alright, so any of you that have seen my unboxing videos know that I like to talk about the packaging first. So here we have just a classic orange Nike box, Nike logo on top, and if you look around the box, we do have one on this right side as well. There's nothing on the back, nothing on the front, but if we move over to the left panel, we do have another Nike logo, and we also have this little tag right here that just says Nike Downshifter 10. This is the black/white anthracite colorway. This is size 10.5 in the US, and we have a couple other locational sizes right here. Over here we have the suggested retail price, again in USD, where they were made, and then a couple other little details. And now we move on to the bottom of the box. We have some Nike trademark information right here. That's in a couple different languages. And then we have the locations of Nike Incorporated and Nike European operations. And finally at the bottom here we have some recycling information, again in a couple different languages, and then where the box was made. Alright, now let's actually open this thing up. Alright, so let's take a closer look at the left shoe. And the first thing that I want to mention before anything else is this shoe is very, very light, which from my experience is typically the case with running shoes, and that does make sense since you're going to want to have light feet when you're running. And as always with my unboxing videos regarding shoes, I'm going to get started with the soles. So if we flip this up like this, and here if you notice we do have a mainly black sole that is broken up by these white segments all along here. And if we move in closer to these white segments, we see that they kind of dip in a little bit. And then along this big one right here, there's actually a pattern in there. And it may be hard to see right here, but if you move over here, you can see all these little ridges in here. And particularly in this spot, we do have that Nike logo right there. Now if we move on to the black segments, you'll see there's also a pattern on each of these little pieces. You can see that there's almost little dots, and then in between those little platforms there's just some flat black rubber. And then if we move over here, you see there's a couple other indentations right here, and then kind of along this far edge, these segments are almost sort of connected. And now thinking about this sole from a running perspective, it kind of does make sense because as your foot bends, you're going to need a little bit more mobility in this area, so these ridges right here will allow for that. And then all these little black separate platforms are going to help grip the ground easier, since each of them will be able to essentially move independently and conform to whatever surface you're running on. So from this standpoint as a whole, this seems like it was a very well thought out sole. Alright, so that's about it for the sole, and now if we move up to the midsole, you'll see that the midsole on this shoe is very, very thick, especially back here, and this should also help with making sure that your feet stay comfortable while you run. So if you're running and you're putting a lot of pressure on your heels, this should help absorb some of that pressure and not have your feet be sore when you're done running. But now if we take a closer look, you'll see that it's kind of thin up here, and then it slowly gets thicker, and then rises up and back down here, and then there's also another one of these white ridges that indents into the shoe right here, and there's also those smaller ridges inside that bigger ridge with a Nike logo right here. And so this ridge actually does not start at the very front of the shoe. If you look, it actually starts very thin right here, and then once it gets to about halfway through the shoe, then it really expands and becomes pretty thick toward the back of the shoe. And what's actually pretty interesting is where these notches start is pretty much in the same spot as where it starts on the sole as well. And this does wrap around the back of the shoe into the middle of the other side. This Nike logo is not present on the inner side of the shoe though. Now one thing that may be tough to see from this angle is this midsole actually comes off the shoe this way a good bit, so if I turn it sideways, you'll see that there's almost a lip right here. Looking from this angle right here, you can really see the shape of the midsole, so it kind of comes down a little bit, and then there's like a curve right here, and then back down again. So it's a pretty interesting shape we have here. And if we take an even closer look, you'll notice that there are some small factory creases in this foam-like material. One thing to note is there is a different pattern on this part of the midsole and this part. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but this piece is very smooth, whereas if you look over here, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but that part is not as smooth. And this foam is pretty stiff. Like when I try to squeeze this, it really does not give that much. So now if we move around to the front here, we can see we have a Nike logo, and again there's kind of like that dotted pattern on that front piece. And now if we move to the inner side of the shoe, the midsole is pretty much symmetric to the other side. Alright, so now moving up to the main body, we see we have a nice white Nike logo right here, and behind that we have a mesh, and then behind that mesh there's another material that has these slots in it, and that is going to help with ventilation and make sure that your foot does not get too hot. So if I stick my hand in here, you'll notice that you can see my finger against that material, so it is fairly thin material. And then around that piece there's this solid black outline. Another thing to note is that the mesh on this side of the shoe is more tightly packed than over here. And now if we move on to the back, we have a stripe right here that says running, and there's a Nike logo. There isn't any loop right here to help you put it on, but this back piece is pretty stiff, which should help the heel not cave in when you try to put on the shoe. Along here we have a dark gray material, which is actually a little bit different than this right here. This looks like it has a little bit more like thick fibers, whereas this is more thin. So you almost have a gradient of colors here. You go from white to gray to black. You'll also notice that this is pretty tall, so this piece is really going to hug the back of your ankle, and if you look at it from a side view, you can see it really goes up there. And now if we move to the inner side of the shoe, again, we have that Nike logo, that black outline, the mesh, and the ventilation slots. So pretty similar to the other side of the shoe. And now if we move on to the front, and again, here we have another mesh material. There is some paper still in here, so I'm just going to remove that really quick so you can see how much it gives. And so that comes out, and now you'll see this does squish pretty well. So again, that'll help with ventilation, and there's not really much material here, so your foot will be able to move around a little bit in the shoe, and that should help with comfort. And that's pretty much the same for right here. It gives pretty easily. And just up here to the lace area, you'll notice that there's also another black outline that's pretty similar to the ones that we have over here, but just around pretty much the lace area. There's a little bit of stitching here as well, just to keep the tongue in place down here. You'll notice we have flat black laces. The aglets here are just that typical plastic material, and the grommets are essentially just holes in this material right here. The grommets are kind of in an interesting pattern, so you'll notice instead of just being completely flat here, it almost does sort of like this along the entire lace line. Another thing is there are two grommets here. That's just so you can lace it up a little higher and if you want to tighten it a little more. So we have the two holes there, and one other interesting little detail is this one right here actually isn't a hole, it's more of a slot. So it's more of like an oval shape, and then the other three here are also holes. And also this material here and here is a little bit thicker on these two spots than it is on the rest of this right here. You can actually kind of see the mesh through it right here, but it's pretty smooth here and a bit thicker, and that's likely because up here is where you're really going to be tightening it to your foot, so it needs to be a little more durable. The tongue itself is very soft and squishy, and we do have this stripe down the middle that has Nike on it, Downshifter, and a Nike logo, and then there's this little piece right here that's essentially just a little loop to guide the laces. It is pretty hard to see like this, but if I expand this out, you'll see that the tongue is actually pretty large, like it's pretty wide, and so that also should help with comfort level since it will be able to wrap around your foot, and it is very soft. Now the mesh of the tongue right here is pretty similar to what we have over here, so it's kind of that tightly packed mesh, whereas the mesh on the inside here is more similar to the front of the shoe, where it is a little looser. And now lastly, if we move to the inside of the shoe, on the back side of the tongue, we have a Nike logo, different sizes, where they were made, and a little bit of other information. But Other than that, on the inside here, there's not really too much to see. The insole does feel pretty hard, but again, since they're going to be for running, it's going to need to be able to take a lot of pressure, so they need to be kind of tough in order to do that. And we do have a little bit more padding around here to support the ankle. Now, just to give you one more look, if you do look right in there, you can see that's where those slots are, and you can actually kind of see them through that white material, so you know this piece right here really is pretty thin. It is really tough to see, but the bottom here indents on the back, so this really will hug your Achilles. So just from initial impressions here, I really like the look and feel of the shoe, and I look forward to giving them a try. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this unboxing. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like, leave a comment if you have any questions or an idea for a future video, and lastly, please don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about my channel so I can grow and help more of you guys out. I'm just helping you out. See you in the next video.